The tragic case of Laura Lopez, a schoolgirl who met a gruesome end after meeting someone she thought she knew, underscores the inherent dangers of meeting strangers. Engaging with unfamiliar individuals always carries risk, especially when the encounter occurs in an environment where the other person has control. It's crucial to think about potential escape routes beforehand, and it is often wise to avoid meeting anyone who seems suspicious. While caution and foresight are commendable in theory, reality often finds people, particularly young women, hoping that nothing harmful will happen to them. Laura Lopez shared this hopeful mindset. She went on a date at night without informing anyone of her plans. Her companion was 10 years her senior, but attended the same school, which led Laura to trust him. Tragically, after that night, she was never seen alive again. 3 days later, local fishermen discovered her dismembered remains, a horrifying and unexpected find. This incident occurred in 2019 and startled Argentina, becoming widely covered by the media. The narrative of a schoolgirl who sneaked out at night, only to be found in pieces, serves as a grim reminder of the perils young individuals face. Marks on her body indicated that she endured severe suffering before succumbing to her fate. Examining how Laura found herself in such perilous circumstances and considering whether this tragedy could have been prevented is vital for understanding and preventing similar future incidents. Laura C.L. Lopez entered the world on September 11, 2001, in Nen Province, situated in the southwestern region of Argentina. She was born much later than her siblings. At her birth, her twin sisters, Damaris and Melissa, were already 18 years old and there had passed the age of 40. Laura's arrival was nothing short of a miracle, and from her first day, her family cherished her deeply. Tragically, when Laura was just 3 years old, her mother succumbed to a long-standing illness. Her father struggled immensely with this loss, descending into profound depression, which led to alcohol abuse. Responsibility for Laura's care fell on her older sister's shoulders. Although still quite young themselves, they had to mature quickly and balance their studies with work and raising their younger sister. In her formative years, Laura exhibited a sociable and engaging personality. She had numerous friends and always managed to connect well with others. Creativity was one of her strengths. She even played the guitar. During high school, she took on part-time work not only to assist her family financially, but also to earn some pocket money for personal expenses. She sold street food and endeavored to save whatever little she could for university. By the time she turned 17, Laura resided with her father and one of her elder sisters, along with her sister's husband and children, in the same household. She frequently looked after her nephews, helping them with homework and ensuring their well-being. Laura harbored aspirations of obtaining a university degree, securing meaningful employment, and one day starting a family of her own. However, Laura's promising life met an abrupt and tragic end under profoundly shocking circumstances that left everyone devastated. On Thursday, September 12, 2019, Laura followed her usual routine. She returned from school and assisted her sister with the nephews. While preparing lunch for the entire family, they engaged in conversation, made plans for the weekend, and decided to visit the park with the children. In the late afternoon, Laura received a call from her school friend Cecilia, who suggested they meet. Laura agreed. At approximately 9 p.m., Laura arrived at Cecilia's house, which was located just a couple blocks from her own residence. For about 2 hours, they sat in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine they had discreetly purchased. They discussed recent news and exchanged gossip. The friends also took several pictures together and posted them on their social media accounts. Close to midnight, they bid each other goodbye, and Laura headed home. Upon returning home, her sister Melissa confirmed that Laura was back before going to bed herself. However, despite the late hour, Laura remained in her room, scrolling through social media feeds, checking emails and chatting with friends on various messaging platforms. The next morning, as Melissa prepared for work, she noticed that her younger sister did not attend breakfast. She glanced into Laura's room and noted that she was missing, but assumed Laura had left early in a hurry. During lunch that day, a concerned Cecilia contacted Melissa to inquire about Laura's well-being. This inquiry puzzled Melissa greatly, and upon learning that Laura did not attend school and her phone was inactive, she became alarmed. As it transpired, nobody had seen Laura since the previous night. Her whereabouts were unknown, and contacting her phone proved impossible. She had returned home after midnight and went to her room, which could only indicate that Laura had left later. The pressing question was, where did she go? There was nothing amiss or alarming in Laura's room. Everything was in its usual place. Only a small tote bag was absent, which she likely took with her. Her phone, an item she always had with her, was also missing. Her last activity on social media was recorded at 3 a.m. Melissa promptly contacted Damaris and relayed all the details. Subsequently, the sisters headed to the police station together to report her as missing. Despite the women's evident concern, the police did not regard the situation with urgency. It appeared that Laura may have left home voluntarily during the night. According to the police assessment, there were no indications of immediate danger to her well-being. Official efforts to locate Laura would commence only if she failed to return within a day. Determined not to squander precious time, the sisters chose to initiate their own search efforts immediately. They reached out to Laura's friends and acquaintances in an attempt to gather any information regarding her possible location. Additionally, they disseminated information about Laura on social media platforms and appealed for public assistance in both searching for her and distributing notices. On Saturday, the girl was still unaccounted for, and finally, the police began their search. By that time, news of her disappearance had spread citywide, becoming a major headline. So far, no results turned up from the search efforts, and the girl's family continued to hope Laura would be found safe. Their hopes shattered on Sunday morning, September 15th. Two men fishing on the Lime River discovered something horrifying. When they pulled a strange object from the water using a net, they were shocked to find part of a human leg. A few feet away near the breakwaters floated several more body parts. The fishermen instantly informed the police of their horrific discovery. Officers who arrived at the scene retrieved 8 severely damaged human body parts from the water. It was apparent these remains belonged to a young girl, yet identification was difficult due to prolonged exposure in water. The nature of the injuries suggested that someone unfamiliar with human anatomy, but skilled with cold weapons and possessing significant physical strength, had dismembered the body. Moreover, it appeared that the killer intentionally disfigured the victim's face to complicate identification. Divers found a large butcher knife at the bottom of the river nearby, likely used in committing this crime. However, any fingerprints or traces of blood were washed away by water. Nonetheless, investigators attached this weapon as crucial evidence in their case file. About a mile from where they found the body parts, police discovered torn clothes, underwear, 1 sneaker, and a tote bag belonging to a woman. Officers quickly speculated these remains might belong to the missing girl who had been sought after by everyone in town for 3 days. The last doubts vanished before conducting DNA tests when her relatives identified these items as Laura's possessions with certainty. This set off an intense investigation focused on bringing justice for Laura and solving this tragic case professionally and efficiently. According to the autopsy results, the cause of death for the girl, a closed traumatic brain injury, which led to severe hemorrhaging. Experts also determined that the killer had brutally assaulted the girl before her death. This was evidenced by specific injuries in her private areas. After sustaining the head injury, Laura did not die immediately. She remained alive for approximately 3 hours. During this time, proper medical care had been provided. It is highly likely she would have survived. Experts identified hematomas and other injuries sustained while she was still conscious. These findings suggest she attempted to defend herself against a stronger assailant. Laura suffered several knocked-out teeth, broken ribs, and significant bruising on her wrists, indicative of being forcibly restrained. At the initial stages of the investigation, Laura's family, close friends, and classmates were interviewed. None were included in the suspect list. However, the scenario shifted notably once detectives retrieved data from Laura's phone. It was discovered that around 3 a.m., while at home, Laura received messages from a man proposing a meeting. The suspect was identified as Alfredo Emilio Escobar, aged 28. He lived close to Laura's residence. Although they attended the same school and shared mutual acquaintances due to overlapping social circles, they did not interact frequently given their age gap and varying interests. The primary suspect, Escobar, is employed as a mechanic and is characterized by his tall stature and notable strength. He holds a reputation in the city as an enthusiastic partygoer, frequently attending social events that involve substantial alcohol consumption and illicit substances. When his parents traveled to visit relatives for the weekend, he would often host similar gatherings at their home. Known for being short-tempered and confrontational, Alfredo's behavior became even more aggressive and potentially dangerous when influenced by alcohol or drugs. It remains unclear why he decided to initiate contact with Laura. According to one of Laura's close friends, she had never mentioned Escobar before. On Friday night, at approximately 3:15 a.m., noticing that Laura was online, Escobar sent her a message questioning why she was still awake at such a late hour. They exchanged messages briefly, and around 10 minutes later, he proceeded to call her. Subsequently, Alfredo made 2 additional calls to Laura's phone. At that time, both were at their respective homes. However, within 15 minutes, Alfredo's phone was traced to Laura's location. They then relocated together to his residence. It appears he convinced her to accompany him and picked her up in his vehicle. By approximately 6 a.m., Laura's phone was turned off. This sequence of events raises significant concerns regarding the circumstances leading up to Laura's whereabouts being unknown following these interactions with Escobar. Lopez's phone had already been switched off, with the last recorded signal traced to Escobar's residence. Evidence suggests that the girl left willingly with her eventual killer. Her room was tidy, and she had taken her bag, packed with perfume and makeup. Laura likely viewed the situation as an adventurous escapade, expecting to return home without anyone noticing her absence. Security footage supported investigators' theories. Alfredo's pickup truck was near Laura's house, then moving away from it that morning. Initially, there was only one person in the vehicle. On the return journey, someone else occupied the passenger seat. The following day, Escobar's phone was disconnected, making it difficult to trace his movements. Nevertheless, his car appeared on other cameras, particularly those near a bridge over the Li River. After crossing this bridge, he turned onto an off-road path devoid of cameras. Police believe this location is where he disposed of the dismembered body parts found a day later. Alfredo had a history of minor offenses including fighting and substance abuse. Approximately a year ago, under the influence of illegal substances, he exceeded speed limits and collided with a police car. He attempted to flee but was apprehended and resisted arrest, which led to his detainment at a police station. Although Alfredo faced potential imprisonment, his case mysteriously concluded with only a minor fine. Similarly, an earlier incident involving intentional harm did not result in criminal charges, nor did an investigation into selling illegal substances to minors. It's apparent that Alfredo's criminal past did not hinder him significantly, either due to fortuitous circumstances or powerful intervention on his behalf. Regardless of these factors, Alfredo perceived himself as untouchable and increasingly emboldened in his actions. Arrest and reconstruction followed these findings, detailing how events transpired at each step. On September 17th, a police unit approached Escobar's residence. The officers arrived just in time and apprehended the suspect along with his parents, who were loading items into a pickup truck. The family appeared to be preparing for a trip to stay with relatives at the insistence of their son. He seemed eager to leave town after hearing about the discoveries in the river. Alfredo did not resist arrest this time. Instead, he feigned ignorance, acting as if he did not understand what was happening or the charges against him. Nevertheless, his nervous demeanor betrayed him, and he promptly requested a lawyer. A medical examination revealed that Alfred had signs of a struggle on his body and several scratches. His right hand's knuckles were swollen, as though he had been involved in a physical altercation. DNA tests confirmed that traces of biological fluid found inside Laura's body belonged to Alfredo, establishing him as the perpetrator. Additionally, particles of Alfred's epithelial tissue were discovered under Laura's nails. Consequently, Escobar was formally charged with rape, murder, and dismemberment. During a search of Alfredo's bedroom, police uncovered numerous bloodstains along with the victim's fingerprints and one of her contact lenses. The most horrific discovery was made in the outbuildings behind the house. It was evidently where Alfredo had dismembered Laura's body. Blood was found everywhere, along with signs of dragging near the gate, where there were also bloody prints. Despite all this evidence, Alfredo persistently denied his guilt. However, detectives managed to reconstruct the events leading up to that tragic night and Laura's untimely death. Alfredo had erased all calls and messages from his phone in an effort to cover up any communication with Laura. His attempts were futile, though, because investigators successfully recovered all deleted information. The day before the tragedy, Alfredo discovered Laura's profile on social media and took an interest in her posts. Seeing her online on Friday night, he decided to reach out. He texted and called her, inviting her for a walk. Laura initially hesitated. Despite this, Alfredo persisted relentlessly, making 2 additional calls and then driving to her house. Upon arriving, he managed to convince Laura to come back to his home. Once there, he began behaving inappropriately towards her. When she resisted his advances, he became violent, physically assaulting her before committing further criminal acts. Laura tried to escape. She cried and threatened to inform the authorities. To prevent this, Alfredo hit her on the head, aiming to silence her cries and halt her attempts at escaping. At this point, he started contemplating his next move. He dragged Laura's unconscious form into a warehouse. Realizing she had stopped breathing, he proceeded with a grim decision to dispose of the body in a brutal manner. Although Alfredo was a mechanic with no expertise in anatomy, his physical strength allowed him to dismember the corpse using a large butcher knife and various tools from his workshop. The following morning, Alfredo transported the dismembered remains to a river and disposed of them in hopes that they would go unnoticed. He discarded not only the body, but also the clothes and weapons used during the crime into the water. After returning home, he cleaned his room meticulously but didn't bother much with cleaning the warehouse. Instead, he just covered the floor with more sand. In the days that followed, Alfredo maintained an outward appearance of calmness and normalcy. However, upon hearing rumors of a body discovered in the river, he made up his mind to leave town. He chose to take his parents along with him, all while they remained unsuspecting of any wrongdoing on his part. Escobar's defense attorney initially requested that his client not be prosecuted until irrefutable evidence was found and DNA test results were available. But when all the evidence was collected, and there was no longer any doubt that Alfredo had committed this terrible crime, the defense changed tactics. Now he tried to blame the victim, saying she agreed to go home with the man, consented to a relationship with him, and then began blackmailing, threatening to report him to the police. The defense's evidence was very unconvincing, and the defendant's attempt to feign mental illness failed miserably. All the evidence and the nature of the defendant's behavior show he was clearly aware of the crime he was committing and then tried to cover his tracks. The victim's blood and DNA were found in his room, in an outbuilding on the property, in the cab of his car, as well as in the back of his pickup truck. Alfredo's ex-girlfriend also appeared in court and reported his addiction to illegal substances and violent tendencies. According to her, when they were dating, the man repeatedly used violence against her and also stole money from her wallet to spend on banned substances. Finally, Escobar was found guilty of all charges against him and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The man pleaded not guilty, showed no remorse for what he had done, and did not apologize to the family of the murdered girl. The case of Matthew Winkler. Secrets of a Religious Family. Sometimes the most horrible and unpredictable crimes are committed in seemingly perfect families. Of course, even in the most prosperous unit of society can come crisis, which will be unnoticed by others, but literally poison the lives of all members of the family and eventually lead to tragedy. The Winklers, in the town of Selmer, were considered by many to be a model family. The young pastor, his wife, and their 3 daughters looked happy, had everything they needed for a comfortable life, were healthy and successful, but in a quiet pool, as they say. In this case, many questions remained unanswered because we heard only one version of what happened. And the story itself became the subject of the book, Sex and Murder: Secrets of a Pastor. March 22, 2006, the small town of Selmer, Tennessee, shook the terrible news. A 31-year-old pastor named Matthew Winkler was brutally murdered in his own home, and his wife Mary and their 3 daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Maria Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, disappeared without a trace. That day, the preacher of the Church of Christ did not show up for the evening service where he was supposed to attend with his family. This circumstance seemed strange and suspicious, because Matthew was always very responsible and could not miss the planned event without informing anyone. None of the family members also answered the phone, which was even more disturbing. Alarmed community members decided to go to the Winklers' residence to find out what had happened and if they needed help. From the outside, the house looked normal. The windows and doors were intact, and nothing suspicious was visible. Inside, there were lights on in several rooms, and they could hear a television playing quite loudly in one of the rooms. It gave the impression that the owners of the house were busy doing their own thing. The front door was locked, but no one answered the knock. Phone calls also went unanswered, and through the curtained windows, it was impossible to see what was going on inside or if anyone was there. However, even though the whole situation was quite strange, no one was in a hurry to call the police. Instead, a call was made to an elder of the religious community, who advised them to look for a spare key and open the door themselves. It took another hour and a half, and when members of the community were finally able to get inside the house, they found an eerie scene. Everything in the house was in its place. There was no sign of intruders, but the owners were nowhere to be seen either. Everything seemed normal until the visitors looked into the marital bedroom. There on the floor, in a pool of his own blood, lay the pastor's body. There was a huge hole in his back from a gunshot wound. Blood spattered everywhere, and bloody foam dried on his face. By then, the body had already cooled and stiffened. It was obvious that Matthew had been lying there for many hours and had probably been killed in the morning because he was dressed in his pajamas. It was only after this that a call was made to the police. By the time the police arrived, a whole crowd of neighbors, churchgoers, and casual passers-by had gathered in and around the house, interested in what was going on. All of these people had left their fingerprints at the crime scene. They left their fingerprints and shoe prints, erased or trampled possible evidence, greatly complicating the work of investigators. The police took the body for forensic examination and found that the pastor was killed by a single shot in the back, fired from a large caliber weapon. He died a few minutes after the wound, from massive blood loss, unable to call for help. It was simply impossible to establish definitively whether there were any strangers in the house at that time, because the people who had arrived before the police arrived had literally destroyed all traces of them. The picture of the crime was quite strange, and those who could shed any light on what happened disappeared. The fate of the wife and daughters of the murdered man remained unknown. The police assumed that the woman and children could have been kidnapped or also killed. By the way, the family minivan Winklers also disappeared from the garage. A massive search was launched and the state issued a yellow alert. This meant that children were missing, and all citizens were asked to be vigilant and assist in the search. But let's break this whole story down from the beginning. Matthew Bryan Winkler was born in 1974, November 21st, in the picturesque country town of Henderson, Tennessee, and was the youngest of 3 sons of Dan and Diane Winkler. Our hero and his 2 older brothers, James and Daniel, grew up in a rather conservative Christian family. Their parents were very religious and brought up their sons in strictness and obedience. It is worth noting that Matthew became a minister of the church in the fifth generation. His father, great-uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler, and great-great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr. were all preachers of the gospel at one time. The father, to top it all off, ran the local preacher's school and was a man respected and influential in his hometown. In their younger years, the Winkler brothers attended Sunday school and were active in church activities. In addition, Matthew in high school was seriously interested in soccer, and everyone who saw his game on the field noted that he had talent, and he could well become an outstanding athlete of world renown. However, later the young man decided to sacrifice a promising sports career in favor of Bible study and church ministry. Since the preaching activity of the head of the family was associated with frequent travel, his wife and children almost always followed him. Because of this, Matthew changed several schools in his childhood, but the active, communicative, and friendly child quickly made friends and gained authority everywhere. When the boy finished school, his family lived in a small city called Austin, located in the state of Texas. Matthew was a creative person, had a powerful charisma, but here are some outstanding achievements in studies could not boast. After graduating from high school, he entered the college Fried-Hardeman and successfully completed it. In parallel, the young man began to try his hand as a pastor, under the careful guidance of his father. Matthew was the youth minister of the Central Church of Christ in the city of McMinnville. He was later appointed to the preaching position at the 4th Street Church of Christ in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carol Winkler, maiden name Freeman, was born in December 1973 in Geist Township, Tennessee, and was the oldest of 2 daughters to her parents. She was also raised in a deeply religious family, with strict rules. The head of the family for many years served as a pastor in the Christian church, where the girl attended Sunday school. A few years later, a second daughter was born to the family and named Patricia. Unfortunately, the girl was born prematurely and had a number of serious health problems, including cerebral palsy, encephalitis, epilepsy, and mental retardation. For many years, the parents did not want to put up with the disappointing diagnoses of the child and desperately tried to treat her, agreeing even to experimental therapy. However, it did not bring any particular improvement. Mary tenderly loved her little sister, always treated her with awe and cared for her as best she could. But in 1987, when 10-year-old Patricia was bathing in the bathtub, her older sister was only a minute away to take something from the bathing accessories, and at that very moment, the girl had another epileptic seizure. When Mary returned to the room, her sister was no longer breathing, and all attempts to resuscitate her had come to nothing. For a 13-year-old girl, it was a huge shock and the first loss in her life. She blamed herself for the tragedy and was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Teachers who saw the deplorable state of Mary sent her to the school psychologist, working with whom she helped. But her father, learning about what was happening, made a scandal and forbade his daughter to go to these sessions, saying that such problems are discussed only within the family. In fact, the girl never received real moral support from her parents. Mary grew up modest and quite shy. She tried to avoid any conflicts, and after the tragic death of her little sister, she became withdrawn. Since her father did not allow her to seek help from a specialist, the trauma over the years has resulted in serious psychological problems. After the death of Patricia, the parents decided to adopt a little girl named Charlotte, who was from a dysfunctional large family. Soon the couple was also allowed to take custody of Charlotte's 2 brothers and sister, so the family was reunited in their new home. Mary was once again the older sister and took care of the younger children while helping her mother. Matthew and Mary Winkler, family life. The future spouses met soon after Matthew graduated from high school. The guy was prominent, handsome, athletic, and enjoyed great popularity with the opposite sex. But to spin novels right and left, he did not allow a strict religious upbringing. The young people immediately developed a liking for each other, which quickly grew into love. For both of them, it was the first strong feeling in their lives, and after a couple of months they met each other's parents, and having received their blessing, began to plan a wedding. In April 1994, the lovers got married. When the family had an older daughter, Patricia, the head of the family was still in college and was forced to leave school for a while. He took a job at a construction site, But long there did not last, because he was not used to hard physical labor. During this period, for the first time, made himself aware of the difficult character of Matthew. He was often angry with others, irritated at small things, and sometimes he could not control his anger. But Mary tried not to complain, and not to tell anyone about what was happening in her family. A meek young woman, brought up in the spirit of patriarchy, obeyed her husband in everything. At first, the Winklers lived near the house of Mary's parents, so she was able to see them regularly. But soon Mrs. Freeman was diagnosed with cancer, which rapidly progressed, and in just a few months she literally burned from the disease. It was another shock for Mary, and the care of her underage siblings now fell on her shoulders. The situation was further complicated by the fact that Mary was pregnant again at that time. But soon after the birth of their second daughter, the family moved to another city, where they bought their own small house. After the move, Mary was completely absorbed in the care of the baby, and almost stopped communicating with her father, as well as with younger brothers and sisters, who were too demanding and constantly needed attention. In addition, the young mother began to suffer from severe postpartum depression. Everyone who was closely acquainted with the family Winkler noted some oddities in the character and behavior of Mary. The young woman was characterized as an introvert and even sociophobic. She did not communicate with anyone. It was difficult for her to make new acquaintances, much less friendships. She suffered from mood swings, was prone to melancholy, and any little thing could bring her to tears. While Matthew was building his career as a pastor, his wife became increasingly withdrawn. The situation became even more complicated when Mary once again became pregnant, and a few months later, she learned that the fetus had died in her womb. Such news strongly shook Mary, who was looking forward to the appearance of this child, and very much dreamed of a large, friendly family. Again, to see the long-awaited 2 stripes on the pregnancy test she could only 2 years later, and her happiness was unbounded. This time, Mary hid her pregnancy for a long time, as if afraid of something. She did so until her situation became obvious. Once again, everyone began to talk about Mary's strange behavior and pathological reticence. The strange behavior of Mrs. Winkler was associated not only with a severe psychological trauma she suffered in childhood, but also with a very unhealthy environment within her own family, which only undermined her already unstable nervous system. The head of the family was a man of authority and demanded unconditional obedience. Despite the fact that in public the Winklers looked like an ideal married couple, where there was trust, mutual respect, and harmony, in reality, their neighbors have repeatedly heard how the husband shouted and snapped at his wife for no apparent reason. No one could even imagine that a respected pastor could raise a hand on his wife until one day Mary had a huge black eye. Despite the fact that she denied the fact of domestic violence and said that it was an accident, the city quickly spread rumors about the cruelty of a young preacher who beats the mother of his children. In addition, Matthew at some point developed an irresistible urge to experiment in bed. He offered his wife to diversify their intimate life with role-playing games, adult toys, and so on. But for Mary, brought up in strictness, with conservative views, such was unacceptable. She strongly restricted her husband in this, which infuriated him, and he repeatedly tried to get what he wanted by force. One day, after another abuse in bed, Mary called her only close friend in tears and complained to her about the situation. The friend, who promised to keep her secret, immediately blabbed about everything, which provoked a new wave of rumors and gossip about the unacceptable behavior of the clergyman. At that time, Matthew was up for promotion and aspired to be a local church leader, but he was rejected because of rapidly spreading unpleasant rumors about him. Moreover, he was also removed from his position in the Sunday school, where he had brought God's word to the children and was in good standing. This was requested by the parents, who had also heard about the pastor's peculiar predilections. All this forced the family to leave their residence and move to another city where they planned to start over. They settled in Selmer, where they quickly gained the love and respect of those around them. Matthew took a job as a church pastor again, and his wife found a part-time job to make a small contribution to the family income. And although the family was still not smooth, their neighbors, as well as the congregation of the church where Matthew preached, considered Mary and Matthew an ideal couple, and their family a model. Next door to the Winkler family lived a young married couple, with whom the couple quickly became friends. They often visited each other, celebrated holidays together, shared news and secrets. A few months before the tragedy, during a joint dinner at the pastor's house, Mary bragged to the neighbors that her husband had bought her a gun for self-defense, and had already taken her to the shooting range several times to learn how to handle it confidently. Mary turned out to be quite a capable student, quickly mastered all the subtleties, and accurately shot at targets. Moreover, it turned out that the Winklers already had firearms in the house, which had been purchased by the pastor earlier, also for self-defense. The guests wondered why the pastor and his wife needed all this, because they live in a quiet town where they have no enemies, and everyone around them loves and respects their family. After another move of the couple, their financial situation left much to be desired. Mary was in search of various part-time jobs, and she also decided to get a medical degree to then get a job in a clinic and help sick children. Soon, Mary decided to improve the financial condition of their family through financial fraud. She herself later claimed that she did not realize that she was doing something illegal and was going to pay back all the money as soon as she got back on her feet. What Mary was doing is commonly referred to as artificially inflating account balances. Mrs. Winkler also received checks from unspecified sources and then deposited them into a bank account she and her husband owned. She then changed the address of the account so that all communications would be routed there. The total amount of checks she received was almost $17,000, which aroused certain suspicions of the bank employees, who decided to invite the couple to the office branch to clarify the circumstances and resolve the situation. But the pastor and his wife never showed up at the bank, and this aroused even more suspicion. It was assumed that Matthew was not aware of what his wife was doing at all. However, after Matthew's death, his wife tried to prove in court that the whole story of fraud was his idea, and that it was he who forced her to make dubious transactions, while he himself remained in the shadows, without arousing suspicion. Where has Mary disappeared to? When Mr. Winkler was found murdered in his own home, his wife and daughters were put on the wanted list, fearing that they too might be in mortal danger. Initially, the meek, shy, and homely Mary was initially viewed solely as a possible victim of the crime. However, after talking to neighbors and receiving information from the bank about financial fraud, she became the main suspect in the murder of her own husband. It was necessary to find out as soon as possible where Mary had disappeared to, where the children were, and if they were all right. They, as well as their family car, were put on the wanted list. Attempts were also made to trace transactions made from Mary's bank card and to locate her location through her cell phone signal. Mary was found just a day later in an Alabama resort town where she and her children were having fun at a local amusement park. It was as if the mother wanted to give her children one last party, realizing that she would soon be going to prison and would see her girls very soon. When the family was taken to the police station to testify, the two older daughters confidently told the same story. According to them, intruders broke into the house and injured their dad, and their mom picked up a gun to protect them. They were then forced to run for their lives. According to the girls, their father was alive and in the hospital, and they were soon to go and see him and return home. What exactly happened in the house, as it turned out, Patricia and Maria Eliza did not see, and learned about the events from the words of their mother. They only heard a gunshot and glimpsed their father lying on the floor, and then their mother put them in the car, and they drove away. Mary almost immediately began to confess, but she claimed that she could not reconstruct the entire chain of events of that day, referring to the temporary blur. According to her, her spouse had abused her for years, humiliating her and inducing her to forms of intimacy that were unacceptable to her. Mary insisted that it was he who had initiated the financial scam she had perpetrated. Matthew demanded total obedience, easily lost his temper, and once gave the will of his fists. This was confirmed by Matthew's secretary at his previous place of employment. The woman repeatedly witnessed how the pastor insulted his wife, who carefully brought him lunch to church, but he was always dissatisfied with something. The evening before the tragedy, there was another scandal in the family, because of which the spouses went to bed in separate rooms. Mary cried all night, and in the morning she did not realize how in her hands was a shotgun, which her husband kept loaded. She entered Matthew's room and shot him in the back while he was still lying in bed. Matthew collapsed to the floor, bloody foam oozing from his mouth and nose. According to Mary, her husband, while still alive, whispered, "Why?" To which she replied, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Mary then took her daughters and left the house, and her husband, as experts have established, tried to reach for the phone to call for help, but he no longer had the strength to do so. By the way, the weapon of crime was found in the trunk of the car on which Mary left with the children. For what purpose she took it with her, Mrs. Winkler also could not answer. At the trial, the role-playing costumes found in their home were presented as evidence of the pastor's humiliation and moral abuse of his wife. Upon seeing them, Mary turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite the fact that she confused her testimony and told several different versions of what happened, the court agreed that she was the victim of a domestic tyrant, and the murder was the result of years of anger, resentment, and pain. However, this did not absolve Mary of responsibility for what she had done. In April 2007, the court delivered its final verdict in this complicated and confusing case. Mrs. Winkler was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but her mental state raised many questions. It was originally expected that the young woman would be sent to prison for at least 6 years, but in the end, she was given a sentence of less than 1 year. She spent 2 months of that sentence in a psychiatric hospital, where experts were trying to determine whether she could regain custody of her children upon release. In the summer of 2008, Mary was given sole custody of her daughters, who all this time lived with their paternal grandparents. Matthew's parents were extremely upset by this circumstance. They believed that their daughter-in-law had deliberately killed their son and suffered virtually no punishment for it, and now their granddaughters were given full custody of her. However, all their numerous attempts to file appeals had failed. As for the fraud case, it never went to trial. The bank never filed formal charges, and the whole story was dropped.
Shafilea Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986, a British Pakistani girl. Shafilea's father, Iftikhar Ahmed, originally hailed from the Gujarat district of Pakistan. At the age of about 20 to 22, Iftikhar moved to Britain for employment. While staying there for a while and during work, Iftikhar falls in love with a foreign girl and marries her. Soon he becomes a father, but when he returns to Pakistan and informs his family about his marriage, they do not accept it. Then Iftikhar's family puts heavy pressure on him to marry another Pakistani girl. Despite Iftikhar's resistance, he eventually succumbs to his family's insistence, and he marries a Pakistani girl named Farzana. After the marriage, Iftikhar returns to Britain and, after revealing the truth to his first wife, divorces her. Then, after some time, Iftikhar calls his second wife, Farzana, to Britain from Pakistan. After coming to Britain, Iftikhar starts living with his wife in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. It is here that on July 14, 1986, Shafilea Ahmed is born. Shortly after Shafilea's birth, the family moves to the town of Warrington in Britain. It is here that Shafilea completes her early education. During this time, 2 more daughters are born in the family, and Iftikhar's family grows larger. Although this family resides in Britain, on holidays, Iftikhar used to take his wife and all his children to Pakistan for vacation. Now the year had come, 2003, and by now Shafilea Ahmed had also turned 17 and was studying law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. When Shafilea and the other children have a break on February 18, 2003, Shafilea comes to Pakistan with her family for vacation. During their trip to Pakistan, this family also participates in a family wedding ceremony. However, just a few days after this wedding, a major incident occurs with Shafilea. She accidentally drinks phenyl floor cleaner. Actually, phenyl is commonly used in Asia for cleaning floors in homes. Now, because phenyl is made by mixing some chemicals and soap, drinking it causes severe pain in Shafilea's throat. The reason behind Shafilea drinking phenyl is initially said to be because her parents pressured her into arranged marriage with a Pakistani boy. Because of this pressure, Shafilea drank the fennel intending to end her life. But later, her parents claimed that someone had poured fennel into an old bottle of water, kept in the same bottle usually used for drinking water, and in the darkness of the night, Shafilea mistook fennel for water and drank it. Due to this mistake, Shafilea had to endure a lot of pain. As a result, she's admitted to a hospital in Pakistan. Now, because Shafilea's injury was quite severe, she has to stay in the hospital for a long time. During this time, the holidays of other family members also end, so Iftikhar takes his 2 children and wife back to Britain, while Shafilea has to stay in Pakistan for treatment. However, shortly after, Iftikhar arranges for Shafilea's return as well, and on May 27, 2003, Shafilea returns to Britain. Straight from the airport, Shafilea is admitted to a hospital for treatment through an ambulance. After several months of treatment, Shafilea's throat heals considerably, and now she rejoins college. Alongside college, she also starts a part-time job. But on September 18, 2003, a college teacher notices that Shafilea Ahmed hasn't been coming to college for the past week. Attempts are made to contact Shafilea via phone, but she cannot be reached. When teacher asked about this to Shafilea's parents, they revealed that Shafilea has not been home for the past week. Their daughter has been missing for a week, and her parents hadn't filed any complaints about her yet, which strikes Shafilea's teacher as very strange. Immediately after this, they inform the police. Upon filing the case, a police team arrives at Shafilea's house for investigation, and questioning begins with her parents. Shafilea's parents say that they last saw Shafilea at their home on September 11, 2003, and since then, she hasn't been seen. Upon this, the police ask, "When your daughter has been missing for a week, why haven't you filed a complaint with the police yet?" To this, Shafilea's parents respond, "This is not the first time Shafilea has been missing from home for a few days. It has happened several times before." To confirm this, when the police checked the records, it is revealed that Shafilea has been missing from home several times in the past. The first time was when Shafilea was only 12 years old. She went missing with her younger sister on March 10, 1998. Because of this, her parents had also filed a missing report for both their daughters with the police. However, at that time, Shafilea returned home with her sister as evening approached. According to records, Shafilea ran away from home for the second time on November 25, 2002. Once again, her father, Iftikhar Ahmad, filed a missing report for his daughter. After extensive searching, Shafilea was found by the police sitting in a park. According to police records, for the third time, Shafilea left home with a friend on February 3, 2003. This time, Shafilea did not return home for 2 days, and then on February 5, 2003, she went to a safe house for orphaned people and filed a report against her parents for domestic violence and mental abuse. After the report was filed, the police officer spoke with Shafilea Ahmed and her parents, and after everything was cleared up, Shafilea returned home. After this, on February 18, 2003, Shafilea, along with her 2 sisters and parents, goes to Pakistan for a family function and disappears from there shortly after returning to Britain. Now, looking at old records, the police also suspect that Shafilea Ahmed may have gone somewhere again this time and will return home in a few days. Therefore, the police try to find Shafilea in all those places where she could have gone. However, even after a few days, the police cannot find any trace of Shafilea from anywhere. Considering Shafilea's history of running away from home before, the police show a little laziness in the investigation this time. After this, some local media start making an issue out of the police's laziness. As a result, demand for a thorough search for Shafilea increases at the local level. Due to the progress in the Shafilea missing case, the police accelerate their investigation. Subsequently, they discover numerous poems written by Shafia at her home. These poems reveal her dissatisfaction with her household environment. Her parents wished for Shafia to lead a traditional Pakistani girl's life, but she favored Western culture. Through her poetry, she expressed this pain. As Shafilea's poems reached the public, the case gains momentum, putting pressure on the police to find her. Consequently, law enforcement intervenes, intensifying their search efforts in places Chafeleer could have visited. Eventually, CCTV footage confirmed Chafeleer's identity to her parents, confirming that the girl in the footage is indeed Chafeleer Ahmed. A few days after Chafeleer went missing, her parents identified her. This made the police believe that at least Chafeleer was alive. However, a new turn in the case occurs when the CCTV footage shows Chafeleer's class teacher. Actually, when the picture is shown to Chafeleer's class teacher, they say that the girl in the photo is not Chafeleer Ahmed. Some other people also confirm by watching the CCTV footage that the girl in the footage is not Chafeleer. Now, the police find it very strange that Chafeleer's parents themselves did not recognize their daughter from the CCTV footage. The police had many questions in their minds, and to find the answers to those questions, they secretly installed some audio recording devices at Chafeleer's home. The police were listening to everything that was happening in Chafeleer's house through an audio recording device. According to the recording, one day Iftikhar is heard saying, "In Britain, if you kill 40 people and there is no evidence against you, then the law here can't do anything to you." Additionally, one day Iftikhar Ahmad is heard saying, "If the police collect DNA samples from inside the car, what could happen?" Furthermore, the audio recording device captures some suspicious conversations that lead the police to suspect that perhaps Chafeleer's father had something to do with his daughter. Now, because the police start to doubt Iftikhar Ahmed, they use his audio recordings as evidence, and on December 18, 2003, the police arrest Iftikhar and his wife Farzana Ahmed, along with 5 other family members, on charges of murdering Chafeleer and hiding her body. The police had arrested these people solely on suspicion. The police hoped that during the investigation, some concrete evidence would be found against these peoples. However, no evidence was found against any of the arrested persons, and eventually, the police released them all. It had been a year since 2004, and there was still no evidence in the case of Chafeleer Ahmed. The police were engaged in efforts to locate Chafeleer. Meanwhile, floods occurred in the famous Kent River, flowing from the Sedgwick area of Britain. When the floods were under control, the body of a girl were found in extremely poor condition on the banks of this river. The distance between the place where the body was found and where Chafeleer Ahmed had disappeared was 70 miles. But still, the police have doubts whether this corpse could be Chafeleer's. However, to confirm this, DNA samples are collected from the dead body and then matched with the DNA of Iftikhar and Farzana. In this case, a major twist occurs when a body washed away in the flood matches with the DNA samples of Iftikhar. This meant that the body washed away from the river was not someone else's but Chafeleer Ahmed's, meaning in the search for Chafeleer Ahmed, whom the police had been looking for the past year, now reaches the police itself in the form of a corpse. Now, the biggest question in front of the police was who and why murdered Chafeleer Ahmed. However, even before the statements and actions of Corpse's parents, there were doubts, and in 2003, these 2, along with 5 others, were arrested. Therefore, once again, Chafeleer's parents are arrested and questioned. The trial of this case is also going on, but even this time, no allegations can be proven against them, which leads the police to release them again. However, after that, the police detain some other suspects and proceed with the investigation against all of them. But despite many efforts, the police cannot reach the murderer. As time passes, people slowly start to forget about Chafeleer Ahmed's case. Chafeleer disappeared in 2003, and now it was 2010. That is, it had been 7 years since Chafeleer's death. By now, Chafeleer's family had also moved on from the incident and had become busy with their daily lives. But then, on August 25, 2010, a major theft occurs at Iftikhar Ahmed's house. By now, Iftikhar Ahmed's family had already become the center of attention in the city due to their daughter's disappearance. Due to this, when theft occurs in this house, it starts making headlines on the front page of newspapers. But once again, this puts heavy pressure on the police. Despite working honestly, the police quickly get involved in the search for the thief. After many days of hard work, the police make a revelation that surprises everyone. Actually, the police arrest not someone else, but Iftikhar Ahmed's daughter, Alicia Ahmed, on charges of theft in the house. In fact, Alicia was Shafilea's younger sister. According to Alicia, she didn't get as much money from home as she demanded and needed. Because of this, she orchestrated the theft of her father's money at her own home. However, the police had solved the theft case very quickly. But the police spot an opportunity here and now. They start talking to Alicia about her sister Shafilea, who disappeared many years ago, and reopen the file related to the Shafilea case. In the initial conversation, the police suspect that Alicia knows something about the disappearance of Shafilea that the world is still unaware of. The police officers try to uncover what happened with Shafilea, but Alicia refuses to cooperate with them. However, the police then tell Alicia, "You have orchestrated a theft in your own house, which could lead to a long prison sentence for you. But if you can provide any information about Shafilea that nobody else knows, your sentence could be significantly reduced." Afterwards, when Alicia reveals some details to the police, everyone is left stunned. Alicia explains, "It was not someone else but my father, Iftikhar, and my mother, Farzana Ahmed, who had beaten Shafilea Ahmad in front of all of us sisters. Then our father put polythene on her face, and due to suffocation, she was dead. Then he placed Shafilea's body in his car and threw it into the distant jungle. However, due to the flood, the body drifted to the riverbank from the jungle." According to Alicia, Iftikhar and Farzara did not like their daughter's modern lifestyle at all. On the surface, Shafilea started falling in love with a boy, and when this matter comes to light, Iftikhar and Farzana quickly try to arrange Shafilea's marriage with their preferred boy. When the family goes to Pakistan for a family function, there is an attempt to forcefully marry Shafilea to a boy there, but Shafilea refuses to marry for this reason, and she consumes fennel. After that, her health deteriorates, and her marriage does not happen either. When Shafilea returns to Britain, her family members here also insist on arranging her marriage with a boy of their choice. But when Shafilea repeatedly refuses this marriage, her father gets angry, and at first beats Shafilea in anger and then covers her face with a polythene bag, and then due to suffocation, Shafia Ahmad dies here. But immediately after this disclosure, Alicia Ahmed becomes a government witness in the case. In exchange, she is assured a minimum sentence in the theft case. However, based on Alicia's statement on September 2, 2010, Farzana and Iftikhar are arrested, and then a case of their own daughter's murder is pursued against them. Both of them remain in jail for several months after the arrest. However, nearly a year later, on September 15, 2011, they are granted bail by the Manchester Crown Court. In the further investigation, the police gather some crucial evidence, and based on that evidence, the trial of this case begins in the Chester Crown Court on May 21, 2012. Initially, Farzana and Iftikhar continue to deny their involvement in their daughter's murder, but when Farzana begins to suspect that she is being framed for her own daughter's murder, she finally accepts in court on July 9, 2012, that Shafilea Ahmed's murder was not committed by anyone else, but by Iftikhar Ahmed himself. In her statement, Farzana also reveals that she tried to stop Iftikhar, but instead, Iftikhar beat and threatened her family, saying, "If any of you ever talk about this to anyone, your fate will be just like Shafilea's." Now, 2 witnesses had testified against Iftikhar Ahmed. Besides, the police who gather evidence also indicate that it was Iftikhar Ahmed who murdered Shafilea, then threw her body far into the jungle. However, a natural disaster struck that area, and with the floodwaters, Shafilea's body drifted and reached the riverbank on its own. After a lengthy trial in August 2012, Farzana and Iftikhar are found guilty of murdering their own daughter and disposing of her body. After the murder, they are then sentenced to 25 years each. It is also proven in court that this was an honor killing. Following this verdict, every year on July 14th, Shafilea Ahmed's birthday, the National Day of Memory for Victims of Honor Killings, is observed in her memory. So with this, the case of Shafilia Ahmed comes to a close. However, perhaps nature also desired that Shafilia Ahmed receive justice and her killers be punished. Therefore, albeit late, Shafilia's parents, her murderers, are also sentenced.